The subject of today's watercolour is the City Hall in Brisbane. I begin the painting by blocking in the City Hall, the foreground and the surrounding buildings. For the City Hall, I'm using a mixture of yellow ochre and burnt sienna. For this part of the painting, I'm using a medium-sized mop brush, which is really great for doing washes and also fine detail. At this point, I'm thinking about getting the right tone for the City Hall, not too saturated in colour and not too dark. The saturation of a colour means how intense it is or how bright it is. I want the sandstone colour to be shown brightly by the morning light. I've placed the City Hall with its tower slightly off centre to the right to give a visual balance to the composition. I'm putting in some palm trees to help me know how dark I need to go with the stone of the City Hall. I'm putting in some of the foreground elements now, which will eventually appear as a frame for the overall composition. I'm painting the tree quite softly without much detail to give more focus to the central buildings. I'm adding a few more dark tones to the tree to give it a bit of depth. Now that the wash for the buildings is dry, I'm starting with some of the details. I'm defining the columns by adding in the shadows between them. The colour I'm using is a warm mixture of burnt umber and Payne's grey. To paint the shadows, I'm using a medium-sized round brush. Now I'm putting in the shadows for the City Hall tower, starting with a bluish tone at the top, which captures more of the blue light from the sky. The blue tone is a mixture of ultramarine blue and rose madder. Then coming down to a golden hue at the base of the tower. This is a mixture of yellow ochre and burnt sienna. Here I'm painting in some more shadows. These are somewhat brighter because of the reflected light close by. I'm painting in the garden beds and some of the detail for the frieze on the front of the City Hall. I'm painting in the sky with a mop brush. I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue and cobalt blue. Darker at the top, coming down lighter at the bottom. Here's some extra shadows to lead the viewer into the picture. I'm adding in some more shadows and details, keeping them simple but descriptive. Here you can see I've intensified the sky to give more contrast to the City Hall and surrounding buildings. This has caused the tower to appear brighter and come forward more. I'm painting in the background buildings now. For the first one, I'm using a mixture of viridian and ultramarine blue. I'll come back to the buildings a little later and add in some darker tones. I'm painting in the doorways now, leaving a little light in the central doorway for a figure later on. So, as I finish the arches, the painting is really coming together now. Here I'm using the fine tip of a mop brush to add some more details. Here's the final details and shadows for the top of the tower. I've painted the clock on the shadow side of the tower with a light wash of ultramarine blue. Working with quite a small brush, I'm finishing off the clock face and the shadows around it. I'm now putting in the final tones to the greenish building. The darker tone brings out the glow of the yellow in the tower's shadow, helping to bring it forward and adding depth to it. I'm now adding in some foreground elements and using the side of the brush to suggest some texture for the pavement. I'm finishing off the detail for the background buildings and the last few details to the City Hall. Here's the finished painting. I've placed in some figures, arranging them to give some balance to the overall foreground and helping to give a sense of scale with the surrounding city. As you can see, the City Hall stands out brightly against the city background of concrete and glass in the early morning light.